Rabotaytebratya, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Hey Mike here, and today I'm going to be watching Feature History Chechen Wars Part 1. So let's jump straight into the video.
Today, just like the Chechen War itself, I'm going to do this video a second time, and do it right. Almost. Sort of.
Feature History.
Привет, и добро пожаловать в Feature History. Can't fault a man for repeating a gag, but I think that's enough about referencing the original episode 6. We ought to stop dwelling on the past. Well, actually, if we do that I'm out of a job, but you know what I mean. Here, indulge me for a moment and rewind your mind back to the 1990s. Unless you weren't alive, then you could hurt yourself. It was the end of the Cold War, and I've gotten the impression that people have the impression that the Soviet Union ended and just turned into Russia. Simple. But of course it wasn't simple. In fact, it was complicated and violent. But all of that violence was concentrated in one area, the Caucasus. But what is the Caucasus? Well, it's a geographical area located here. Oh, you wanted me to elaborate? Well, then strap in for some feature geography. The Caucasus is a place with almost as many mountains as it has ethnicities and languages. Its iconically rugged and rough terrain left it diverse, isolated, and for the longest time, impassable. It's typically split.
Is this where like Dagestan is located or something? I'm not sure, I'm just taking a wild guess.
Between the northern Greater Caucasus and the southern Lesser Caucasus. The somewhat homogenized people of the south saw empires come and go, Roman, Persian, and Ottoman to name a few. Whereas the many disparate people in the north enjoyed freedom, with credit to the insulating mountains that encased them. That environment birthed a culture that was decentralized and remote, mountainsides littered with watchtower villages. As a person of the Caucasus, you most likely only had three main priorities: your family, your faith, and your freedom. This order was eventually threatened by Catherine the Great, as the Tsardom of Russia sought out a trade connection with the Middle East, and so protection and pacification became the Russian army's agenda. The better part of the 19th century was spent attempting just that, only to be met with constant and consistent resistance. The religious leader, Imam Shamil, would attempt to bring the many different people of the Caucasus together to throw out the Russians. Using his Islamic faith and the concept of jihad, he got close. He, however, came to despise the Chechen people specifically, considering them too resistant, too obsessed with banditry. He really would have gotten along with my commenters. Eventually, his inability to unite the Caucasus would be his and the land's downfall. This of course didn't cease disorder. The Caucasus was to be the frontier of Russia, bandit country, a no man's land, the wild not west. As we all know, by 1917, Russia was having a bit of a phase. Revolutions and civil war and etc. The whites, the reds, and the everyone else duking it out. And in all the confusion, a big whack of the Caucasus would break away as the Mountain Republic. It wasn't long before the Soviets would arrive and enact the process of divide and conquer, their epic-sounding freedom to be replaced by the mundane-sounding autonomy. Of course, the Caucasians did what they do best, resist. In fact, it is said that only a Caucasian can beat a Caucasian. And so when 1922 swung around and the Georgian-born Joseph Stalin took power, there must have been a few shits.
When I was watching those Moscow videos, I noticed that there's a lot of statues of this guy. Was he like one of the greatest leaders in the Caucasus, or what?
After the German invasion of the Soviet Union, the Chechen people were accused of collaboration with the Wehrmacht, and as a consequence were deported to the desolate Kazakhstan in 1944. Guilty or not, mass genocide, often frowned upon.
Damn.
Their homeland was to be converted, all symbols of their culture and history put to the torch to give way for a Soviet paradise.
Damn.
The regional capital, Grozny, was established as a Russian city for Russian people.
Grozny is now like the capital city of Chechnya, right?
Only when Khrushchev succeeded Stalin, he would go about de-Stalinization. A return of the Chechens was permitted in...
De-Stalinization, from what I'm getting, is let's just say the movement Joseph Stalin created. This guy, I forgot his name because it's hard to pronounce, but I guess it is when this guy was like reversing all the things that Joseph Stalin put in place for those people of Chechnya.
1957, but the effects of Stalin's deed would not disappear overnight. Ethnic tensions and clashes between Russians and Chechens became commonplace. It wasn't until the 1980s that the Chechens once again became the majority in the region, but in the 80s the affairs of Little Chechnya mattered little to Soviet higher-ups. There were far more pressing concerns. Under the leadership of Brezhnev and his subsequent successors, the Soviet Union had begun to stagnate and decay. Soviet leadership had become
Vladimir
old and
Putin
decrepit, and with each general secretary they buried, the Union's own death beckoned. It was clear the Union would have to be reformed or die, and Mikhail Gorbachev was very keen on reform. With policies of glasnost and perestroika, he had begun to open up the government and allow elements of the free market in. Free elections were permitted, but this did not see reformers elected, instead revolutionaries. Soon many of those in charge of the Soviet republics were looking to go their own way. One such politician was Boris Yeltsin, who had been elected in probably the most important Soviet republic, Russia. He and his peers would have to resist one last attempt by communist hardliners to throw out both reformers and revolutionaries in August of 1991. When he had done just that, it was clear there was no communist control anymore. Yeltsin, of course, wasn't the only one sticking it to the communists. In September, the Chechen and former general Johar Dudayev gathered militants and threw the communist government out of Chechnya. He gathered popular support and declared the independent Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, making Chechnya one of the earliest republics to declare independence from the Soviet Union. It wasn't until Christmas Day 1991 Gorbachev would formally dissolve the Union into 15 independent republics. Chechnya was not actually recognized in this act and was officially part of the new Russian Federation. You can see the issue here. The not independent republic continued to be practically independent, as President Yeltsin had bigger fish to fry, attempting to create his capitalist democratic Russia and prevent a complete total descent into chaos, crime and corruption. That's not to say things were peachy for Dudayev and Chechnya. There was a mass exodus of Russians as violence boiled over, and with them left many of the educated and skilled workers, leading to the collapse of Chechnya's industry. Government services were also abysmal, as Dudayev became obsessed with arming and organizing militias. Chechnya was more gun than government. Soon there were elements inside Chechnya that looked to oust Dudayev, and a failed coup in March 92 showed they were serious. The president would respond by throwing out any kind of republican element from his republic, ushering in direct rule, and later in 93 dissolving his parliament. Not like Yeltsin was any better, really the two should have been best buds. However, it was around the same time Yeltsin's administration began to prioritize Chechnya. You see, Russia is one of the world's largest energy exporters, trading metric shit tons of petrol and oil, and the oil deposits of the Caucasus, and more specifically Chechnya, were integral. The counter-movements inside Chechnya began to receive Russian support. 1994 saw Chechnya blockaded, trade cut off, and the only thing going in was Russian arms and money to those against.
So basically the Chechens were good at using their guns, arms, and spirit of fighting than their mouth. And when it came to politics, I think they showed their front of they wanted people outside Chechnya to be scared of them instead of coming out as peaceful.
The eventual coup would disastrously fail though, and Russian arms and mercenaries, or what they really were, conscripted soldiers, were exposed and paraded for all to see. So it was decided, screw subtlety, and an ultimatum of pack it in was given to Dudayev, who responded, now say it with me if you can, a no. Then the order was given to restore constitutional order to Chechnya, by force. On the 11th of December 1994, the war began, and already it was severely unpopular. And that wasn't the only bad sign, the other was the plan.
Who was behind this war, or who sent out the plan to go and invade Chechnya? Was it Putin, or was it Yeltsin, or was it just a random military general?
It was simple. 3 convoys, north, west and east, to all blitz through to the heart of Chechnya.
Damn, they got them left, right, top, into the center.
After the capital had been softened up with some bombardment. Yeltsin and his administration thought that was perfect. It'd be a bloodless blitzkrieg.
So what I'm looking at, it is he explained what happened is they sent 3 trucks from 3 sides, the north, east and the west, if I saw correctly. Then I think they waited, then they called in their Air Force, then the Air Force
Quick strike.
Then their Air Force did some quick strikes, and then it dropped bombs. As soon as it dropped bombs, then the trucks went in then to kill whoever was standing.
And it's over. The federal soldiers would be exemplary, showcasing restraint and their professionalism, as overpowering military hardware carried them to victory. Truth was, Chechnya is a mountainous, rugged place populated with a devoted and heavily armed people with a long history of resistance, going up against poorly trained conscripts backed by a nation suffering recession. The recipe for success. Judayev had field commanders swiftly mobilize their militias. The command was heavily decentralized and the Chechen fighters would fight mostly as guerrillas, never letting up on the convoys until the very moment they reached Grozny. When the federal forces did arrive at Grozny, thousands of civilians were already dead from a week-long series of aerial and artillery bombardments. All the death in the air only further incited the Chechen fighters. On New Year's Day, 1994, Grozny was stormed. Armoured personnel carriers simply drove straight into the city. But they were armoured carriers, not invincible carriers, and so quickly vehicle after vehicle were downed by ragtag groups of fighters. With the vehicles went all the conscripts inside.
Damn, these Chechen guys never gave up that easily, because it seemed like the army had more, armor, military, like they had more guns, they had the stronger weapons, the more lethal weapons, but these guys knew their way in and out of the city, hence, because it was their territory.
And soon Russian casualties were stacking as the enemy eluded them inside the still populated city. The federal forces were made to withdraw from the slaughterhouse, and things were to be done the traditional Russian way, indiscriminately bombing the shit out of it. It was only when there was nothing left to defend did Chechen General Aslan Maskhadov finally give the order to retreat from the city on January 18th. The Russians were now free to claim the carcass of Grozny. Chechens too had traditional methods to resort to, and retreated to the mountains to fight the Russians. Ambushes became common, and the fighters offered Russians no mercy, and so Russians would do likewise in their raids. The war soon became not a battle for land, but for bodies. The mountains were a blessing, but also a curse, as the fighters became increasingly cooped up as federal forces continued their advance. Chechnya's chief mufti Ahmed Kadyrov would declare their struggle a jihad and attempt to see foreign volunteers assist them. Foreign offerings in numbers was, however...
Wasn't Ahmed is a guy who was bombed, right? Or something, who was killed from a bomb in a meeting or something like that? Was a community meeting or something like that? Was he the guy that was killed there?
Slim, but they made up for it in their money. The encirclement would not be broken by manpower though, nor any aid.
Then yeah, when I saw, I think Ahmed Kadyrov's son is now like the leader of Chechnya, or the president of Chechnya,
for that matter, but instead
Chechnya.
By the field commander Shimil Basayev. He led a group of fighters in June to attack the Russian city of Budzhanovsk, but not in any traditional sense of sieging or storming. They instead entered a maternity hospital and took around 1,800 of the occupants hostage. His main demand was for a ceasefire. The Russians answered with an attempted storming of the hospital. It failed catastrophically, and Basayev remained with both hospital and hostages, and so the Federation gave in. A ceasefire was signed. It's not like this would be the last, or even the worst terrorist attack in the conflict either, but I digress. The window offered was used by the Chechens and Russians to reorganize, regroup, and rearm. Federal troops began to move more and more of their number from Grozny to the mountains, and when that ceasefire ended, it was almost like nothing had changed. Heavy fighting continued, and the slaughter resumed. By 1996, it was clear.
So all these things happened in 2 years, which was 1994, 1995. Well, that's a lot.
Something had to change. Yeltsin was absorbed by his re-election bid, and so the army had to show results, claim a victory, anything. That had come in the form of Johar Jadayev's assassination in April 1996, killed by 2 guided missiles. When Basayev announced the death on a broadcast, Yeltsin claimed it as that victory he so desperately needed. But of course it wasn't that simple. I wouldn't need 2 parts if any of this was simple. As Yeltsin was sworn in for his second term, the army in Chechnya was blatantly sidestepped and Grozny stormed by militants. For the unlucky few troops still in the city, well, use your imagination. Grozny was captured and the Russian army back at square one. So either it was time to do it all again, or just call it quits. The Yeltsin administration chose the latter, and the Khasov-Yurt Accord was signed off on August 30th, 1996. The Russian army would leave Chechnya. They'd respect the boundary, but not recognize it. It was also decided that any matter between Russia and Chechnya could be left to 2001, when all of this was no longer Yeltsin's problem.
That was a lot to take in and a good history lessons for those who didn't know. And as for me, this was like my first time hearing. I've read about the Chechen War, but like seeing it visually and things that happened there, like that's when you get to learn more and then take more information. I will never know how accurate this information is because everyone always says, no, this is not correct, this is what happened. Everyone has their side of the story. But yeah, I'm glad to have like a little bit more of knowledge about what happened in the Chechen War. And yeah, guys, with enough talking, I know a lot of bloodshed, I know a lot of bodies were shed, a lot of casualties were there, a lot of families lost their fathers, their brothers. A lot was done here, and it's not always good to see, but I'm just glad that there is peace now. Or even if there is no peace, or that maximum of peace, I know Putin is like a good relationship with, I think, Kadyrov, the one who is president now. Even if they might say there is no peace or anything, I'm just glad that there aren't as many wars as there used to be in the past. And 1996 is not long ago. You can't say it's 1930. It's not that long ago, and yeah, some countries are still recovering, some countries are still working on their relationship with other countries for them to become better countries and stuff like that. And I hope like everyone faces peace. Like, we're tired of wars, we're tired of casualties, we can just talk everything out, you know. But yeah, guys, if you reach to the end of the video, please leave a like, comment and subscribe, and see you on the next one. Peace.